things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Hello.
Lasers.
Hello.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live worldwide from high atop the beautifully snow-covered peaks of the Idaho mountains, ripping through the electromagnetic soup, tearing through the atmosphere, and tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, January 6, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the Science Delusion. That's right. A lot of scientists have gotten mixed up between science and scientism, and we're going to discuss the difference tonight, January 6, 2020, on the Dark Wolf's Den Show. But first, today in history. Wow, I knew something didn't feel right. On this day in 1898, the very first telephone message was successfully sent from a submerged submarine. This achievement was made by Simon Lake, one of the pioneer submarine inventors. It is said that he was inspired after reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. And that is today's Today in History. And of course, I was looking for a science-based type today in history, and thank goodness I was able to find one. That was actually pretty cool because that was something that happened based on science fiction that becomes science fact, right? And that has happened quite a lot through history. If you look at the first show we did, our pilot episode of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, we talked about cryptids, and the whole point of that episode was to show that for many, many years there were creatures that are known today that were considered cryptids back then. Like the gorilla, right? The gorilla was considered a cryptid creature until 1902. And that's just one of many that science said could not exist and turned around and had to admit that it did. And this is nothing new for science, of course. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know that we have ripped a lot on science and especially dogmatic science. So I've said many times I agree with real science. Real true scientists are different than those that practice scientism. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's rarely that a scientist comes out and calls out the rest of their field. But in 2013, a scientist named Rupert Sheldrake did just that. He went on a TED Talk and he spoke about the Science Delusion. And this TED Talk was, of course, subsequently banned, which made it now one of my absolute favorite TED Talks ever, of course. But tonight we're going to hear from Mr. Sheldrake, and we're going to talk about the Science Delusion. And guys, let me tell you, we're about to learn a lot about why I actually do what I do. This is why I preach so much and so heavily about dogmatism, scientism, and just the wrong way of doing science. They call a lot of us pseudoscientists, but as we're about to find out, what they practice is closer to pseudoscience than anything we've ever done. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, may I present to you one of my heroes, one of my favorite scientists, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake.
The science delusion is the belief that science already understands the nature of reality in principle, leaving only the details to be filled in.
So the science delusion is the idea that science already understands the entire nature of reality, and there's just a couple things left they got to figure out, but nothing major, which, as we know, if you've listened to this show long enough, is absolutely false. But again, getting ahead of ourselves.
This is a very widespread belief in our society. It's the kind of belief system of people who say, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. It's a belief system which has now been spread to the entire world.
But ultimately, it is just that, a belief system. And it's merely trading out one belief system for another at this point, right?
But there's a conflict in the heart of science between science as a method of inquiry based on reason, evidence, hypothesis, and collective investigation.
Which I think we all can agree is real science.
And science as a belief system or a worldview.
Also known as scientism.
And unfortunately, the worldview aspect of science has come to inhibit and constrict the free inquiry, which is the very lifeblood of the scientific endeavor.
And unfortunately, as we have seen time and time again on this show, there is a narrative that is held by scientism. And even more unfortunately, that narrative has been maintained throughout a lot of scientific fields. And unfortunately, it's to the point now that if you find something that doesn't agree with the narrative, you just will not be allowed to be published by your peers or anyone else, and you will be ridiculed and pretty well laughed at and made a laughingstock of your field of interest, whether it be chemistry or astronomy or the worst ones about following the narrative, as we know from this show, is archaeologists. If you find something in archaeology that doesn't match the record or the given narrative for archaeology, you will be pretty well turned into a discredited hack and basically considered a tinfoil hat-wearing loon, even though what you found was absolutely true. It just didn't fit the narrative, and we find this over and over and over, time and time again. And again, if you listen to our shows for any amount of time, you'll see that this is pretty well practiced amongst pretty much all the scientists anymore.
Since the late 19th century, science has been conducted under the aspect of a belief system or worldview, which is essentially that of materialism, philosophical materialism. And the sciences are now wholly owned subsidiaries of the materialist worldview.
And materialism, for those who may not know, is the doctrine that nothing exists except matter and its movements and modification. In other words, if you can't pinpoint it as a particle or measure it with the equipment in which they have now, then it must not be real or true, which, as we know, is really a false statement in and of itself, because there's a lot of things that cannot be measured by this materialist worldview. But of course, anything that they don't agree with or doesn't fit their narrative, once again, we know is called pseudoscience and is discredited to the best of their abilities. Furthermore, for any scientific field to say that they have the end-all be-all answer to anything is nothing short of arrogant, because there's a lot of science that we just don't know, and that means there's a lot of technology that we haven't even dreamed of yet, that will be able to measure things that we haven't even imagined before. So for any scientific basis to say that, or scientific field to say that they've got it all figured out, or that even worse, that if it cannot be measured by their equipment, then it cannot be real, is nothing short of arrogant. What say you, Doc?
I think that as we break out of it, the sciences will be regenerated.
I gotta say, that is quite a positive view, and I do hope that is the case. And we are starting to see here in the latter years the breaking out of some of this materialism, and you've got shows like ours here that we fight against the materialist worldview every chance we get.
What I do in my book, The Science Delusion, which is called Science Set Free in the United States, is take the 10 dogmas or assumptions of science and turn them into questions, seeing how well they stand up if you look at them scientifically.
And the 10 dogmas of science. This is something that you guys hear me preach about constantly, is the dogmatism that is so prevalent amongst these scientific fields and how bad that is for real science. Well, I love this idea here of taking these dogmatisms that are prevalent throughout all of science right now, or all of materialist science, let's be clear, materialist scientism, and let's break these dogmas down and turn them around and turn them into questions instead of statements. Because when you question things, as I've told you guys a million times, question everything. As I've told you guys, with the questioning here, when you question scientism and take their dogmas and turn them around on them, well, things tend to break down on their side.
None of them stand up very well.
And can you give us some examples, Doc?
What I'm going to do is first run through what these 10 dogmas are, and then I'll only have time to discuss one or two of them in a bit more detail.
And I happen to know that there's another talk that he gives where he goes even further in depth on some of these dogmas, so if we have time at the end, I'll try to get those in. But no promises, ladies and gentlemen, only if we have time left over.
But essentially the 10 dogmas, which are the default worldview of most educated people all over the world, are first, that nature is mechanical or machine-like.
And our first dogma tonight, that everything is mechanical and one process leads to another. And, you know, they even tried to convince us that the atom was like a miniature solar system at one point. Of course, now we know that is completely not the case. But this just goes to show the dogmatism of science, because if you dared to question that for the longest time, you were crazy and a science denier instead of a person actually making a valid inquiry. But this first dogma of science, once again, is that everything is mechanical. It's all just one great big natural machine, and I really have a big issue with that.
The universe is like a machine. Animals and plants are like machines. We're like machines. In fact, we are machines. We're lumbering robots, in Richard Dawkins' vivid phrase, with brains that are genetically programmed computers.
My main issue with that last statement, according, of course, to Mr. Richard Dawkins, who is in some fields highly respected, though none that I've ever been involved with, just the same, Mr. Dawkins states that we are pretty much just lumbering robots. But it must be some really weird programming, because it seems to me if we were all robots, we would all pretty well react to the same things exactly the same way every time. Even organic robots, I would say, would have the exact same reactions to the exact same things. And we know that that is not the case, because even though instinctually we are supposed to be so scared of snakes that we literally freeze up, just the same, there are people who love snakes and own them as pets and everything else. I'm sure you may know a couple of these people. I'm not exactly one of the people who would own a snake or a reptile in my home, but the point here is I don't believe that we are lumbering robots with DNA programming, because once again, I think our reactions to the stimuluses of the world would all be pretty well exactly the same, and fresh ideas would be hard to come by. Some would argue that they are right now, but that's a whole nother topic. And yes, I will concede that the body does work off electricity. The heart works off electricity. The brain works off electricity. However, we cannot put together electrical circuits and create consciousness. Though AI is being worked on to try to prove me wrong on that one, just the same, you'll never have organic consciousness as AI. It will always be, just as it is in the name, artificial intelligence, not organic conscious intelligence that you cannot get from just a bunch of accidental or purpose electrical impulses.
Second, matter is unconscious. The whole universe is made up of unconscious matter.
Everything in the universe is made up of unconscious matter. And that's another one I have a real hard problem with, because some would argue, yeah, maybe rocks aren't conscious, fair enough, but how would human consciousness arise, right? How would animals be conscious? How would any type of consciousness? Some even say the earth itself has a consciousness. How would that arise if everything is non-conscious matter? And I'm not saying all matter has consciousness, though there is that idea in a lot of philosophical circles, which is called panpsychism, and that's the idea that consciousness exists in every single bit of matter, regardless if it's a piece of a rock and or a human consciousness itself, or a human body, I should say. And if you're wondering if there's a right answer to that, there is not yet. Again, this is still highly debated in many philosophical circles.
There's no consciousness in stars, in galaxies, in planets, in animals, in plants, and there ought not to be any in us either, if this theory is true. So a lot of the philosophy of mind over the last 100 years is trying to prove that we're not really conscious at all.
And as funny as that sounds, truth be told, one cannot prove that one is conscious any more than one can prove that one is unconscious, right? I mean, we know we're conscious, but how would you prove it? How can you prove that you're not a brain 1,000 years from now, somewhere in a jar, just having a simulated experience within itself? There's no way we could prove any consciousness, as well as there's no way to disprove consciousness. And this is one reason the scientific method was literally set up to ignore the idea of consciousness. It was so fundamentally accepted and known that everyone was conscious that there was no reason to find a way to test it, right? But if you think about it, there's no way to prove that you're conscious any more than there's a way to prove that I'm conscious. But equally, I disagree with the idea that trying to prove that we are literally not consciousness, because we all know that we are very much consciousness, and our consciousnesses of our own uniqueness at that.
So the matter's unconscious, then the laws of nature are fixed. This is Dogma 3.
I'm sorry, I can't. I have a hard time presenting this with a straight face. Dogma number 3. The laws of science are fixed. And this couldn't be more true, actually, as we'll find in the second half. But the laws of science are fixed. That doesn't mean they're constant. That means they're fixed.
The laws of nature are the same now as they were at the time of the Big Bang, and they'll be the same forever. Not just the laws, but the constants of nature are fixed, which is why they're called constants.
And once again, stick around for the second half, as we're going to hearken back to this one.
Dogma 4, the total amount of matter and energy is always the same. It never changes in total quantity, except at the moment of the Big Bang, when it all sprang into existence from nowhere in a single instant.
And I still don't understand how one can take absolutely nothing and then all of a sudden get everything, not just something, but everything in the entire universe. I have a real issue with that. But that is the fourth dogma, that the overall amount of stuff in the entire universe will be exactly the same for all time. Yeah. Now on to dogma number 5.
The fifth dogma is that nature is purposeless. There are no purposes in all nature, and the evolutionary process has no purpose or direction.
So this dogma literally states that everything is one great big happy accident with no real purpose at all. It shouldn't even be. It has no purpose for being. It shouldn't be. It's just a great big machine, which harkens back to the first dogma of scientism, which is that everything is machine-like. And they carry that on through the entire universe, from the smallest atom to the biggest black hole. They claim is all just, a mechanical process, one following another, which again harkens back to that first dogma.
Dogma 6, the biological heredity is material. Everything you inherit is in your genes, or in epigenetic modifications of the genes, or in cytoplasmic inheritance. It's material.
To put that another way, the soul or the spirit is an impossibility because they can't find a material existence for it. You are just a bunch of neurons and electrons and flesh that happen to come together in the right way to create you. You are just, again, one more of those happy accidents of the universe, and there is no real soul or consciousness to be had. That is the sixth dogma of science. Understand, I want to be clear, these are not things I believe, these are what scientism believes. This is why I do the shows that I do, and why I rail so hard against dogmatistic science is because it is not real science. It is scientism parading as science. It is nothing more than narrative. On to dogma number 7.
Dogma 7, memories are stored inside your brain as material traces. Somehow everything you remember is in your brain in modified nerve endings, phosphorylated proteins. No one knows how it works, but nevertheless, almost everyone in the scientific world believes it must be in the brain.
And the youngest of the paranormal communities, the Mandela Effect community that has recently grown over the last, 4 or 5 years, if not, 10 years, that has really questioned this dogma, right? When it comes to memory, Mandela Effect community has really dug into the deep research and proven that the dogmatisms of scientism when it comes to that are very much wrong.
Dogma 8, your mind is inside your head. All your consciousness is the activity of your brain and nothing more.
This is another dogma that really gets under my skin because I've seen a lot of things in this world that I cannot explain. A lot of things that happen from one's mind. Yes, I have seen some crazy stuff manifest. I personally have manifested things. Now, let me ask you how a bunch of electrochemical signals can create manifestation. Furthermore, let me ask you how a bunch of electromagnetic signals could create a unique mind in each individual person. If this is the same robotic processes from Dogma 1, the same mechanical processes over and over and over, and the other dogma that pretty much stated that we're lumbering robots, we are that very much an accident, a happy accident, and it's funny how they love their happy accidents and call us the pseudoscientists, right? But this dogma here just really gets under my skin because I don't think anybody would agree that the mind, at least nobody listening to this show, would agree that the mind is just a happy accident of the brain. Go ahead and put a 1 if you think it is the case, that the mind is just a bunch of electrochemical reactions making us think that we're conscious and thinking and have awareness, right? Go ahead, put a 2 in the chat room if you think that it's bollocks. There's no way that our mind and our thoughts and our real consciousness is anything more than a bunch of electrical signals.
Dogma 9, which follows from Dogma 8, psychic phenomena like telepathy are impossible. Your thoughts and intentions cannot have any effect at a distance because your mind's inside your head. Therefore, all the apparent evidence for telepathy and other psychic phenomena is illusory. People believe these things happen, but it's just because they don't know enough about statistics, or they're deceived by coincidences, or it's wishful thinking.
And like I just said a moment ago, I think that is absolutely wrong because I personally have manifested things. I personally have seen psychic activity. I personally have seen mind over matter. I personally have seen many things that already dogmatic scientism has said cannot happen or cannot be. It is impossible. It's just a bunch of coincidences and illusions. Well, I know illusions, guys. I know illusionists. I know a little bit about magic. And let me tell you, when it comes to illusion, there's illusion, then there's things that regular dogmatic science cannot explain. And we know that for a fact. A lot of us have witnessed and experienced things that we know are beyond the realm of what they would consider normal. Even though, once again, they call us the pseudoscientists, what they use to consider normality in these cases is very much pseudoscience. And I could go on for hours about this, but I do, don't I? That's what I pretty much base a lot of this show on, is fighting pretty well that dogma amongst many. And ladies and gentlemen, number 10 on the list of dogmas practiced by scientism.
And Dogma 10, mechanistic medicine is the only kind that really works. That's why governments only fund research into mechanistic medicine and ignore complementary and alternative therapies. Those can't possibly really work because they're not mechanistic. They may appear to work because people would have got better anyway, or because of the placebo effect. But the only kind that really works is mechanistic medicine. Well, this is the default worldview, which is held by almost all educated people all over the world. It's the basis of the educational system, the National Health Service, the Medical Research Council, governments, and it's just the default worldview of educated people.
There's so much to break down here. Oh my goodness. So, oh man, and there's the music for the break too. So I'm going to try to go quick. First, placebo effect, guys. That is mind over matter. That is literally called mind over matter. They say the mind is creating the effect in the body. So how can they point back to mind over matter when, remember, your mind is just a happy accident of the brain to begin with and doesn't really exist? And yet they call us pseudoscience, but they reference back to their own dogmatisms and their own theory taught as fact. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, another fact that is sad but true is we have to go ahead and take a break right here. So we will be right back with the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show and the Science Delusion right after these messages. Don't you touch that dial.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit. Congratulations, the weekend has begun. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. Are you enjoying tonight's Dark Wolf's Den radio show, Dogmatism, Part 1 of the Science of Delusion? I know I am. If you are and you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. Our weekends around here start on Wednesday nights, and Jerry kicks it off right. He'll be back again tomorrow night, Thursday, January 7th, as Part 2 continues with Consciousness. Again, all shows start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, so be here or be square. Then Friday night, I'll return with the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show with a look at futurists. Explore with me the life of futurists and see what some have seen as the future. That rabbit hole goes deep, so join me Friday night, January 8th, 2021. Can you believe it? It's already the 2021. Then Saturday night, we'll kick off Subconscious in a continuation of tomorrow night's Consciousness. It's going to be a good journey down the rabbit hole through the power of the subconscious. Saturday, January 9th, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then we'll end out the weekend right Sunday night with a look at Serpent Mound. Ooh, I'm excited about this. We'll explore the rich history of the Serpent Mound and the symbolism that it's left behind, and that'll end out our weekend right Sunday, January 10th, 2021. So that's a look at the weekend ahead for you here to explore on the very best of common sense radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Please make sure to hop on over to riponrabbithole.com and sign up for your Backstage Pass. It's absolutely free to do so. You can find the Dark Wolf's Den Show group there, which has a bunch of interesting features where you can even suggest topics. It's a lot of fun, where the conversation continues at the riponrabbithole.com. I'll see you there. As we return now back to the Dark Wolf's Den radio show, Wednesday, January 6th, 2021, with a look at the Science of Delusion. Part 1, Dogmatism. Ow! Your weekend has begun. The longest weekends on radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Wednesday, January 6th, 2021, and tonight we are discussing the Science Delusion. That's right, the difference between science and scientism. And before we get back into things, I had an experience the other day that you guys might have actually had sometime along the lines too. This is called the Facebook Delusion, and I experienced this the other day. You know, I forget that you can't post real information on Facebook anymore. And it's really funny, it's neat how they got this set up. So these companies like New York Post and different companies like that write these fake news articles. Then they put them out, and when they're questioned, they're also the fact checkers. So they let their own stuff through and censor anything they don't agree with and call it false, right? Well, I get sick of being censored. What about you guys? I know it really bothers me a lot. And we here at the Ripon Rabbit Hole really got tired of it too, so we fixed the problem, ladies and gentlemen. We've created the Rabbit Hole. We want you to come down the rabbit hole with us over at the riponrabbithole.com. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. That's right. Over there, you will find Down the Rabbit Hole. You're going to have to sign up for a Backstage Pass, absolutely free. Make sure you have your account registered, and you'll be able to join us in the rabbit hole back there. This is the new version of social media, ladies and gentlemen. We do not censor. We will not take your post down. We want information to be shared and shared freely. We are a community-generated press, and we want to take that to the next level. And we want to do it for you guys because we, like you, are tired of our information being censored on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all of the other things that we try to use for social media that decides that our information isn't good enough and only we can be presented with the information they allow us to be presented with. There used to be a time when the internet was free, and this delusion can be broken also by you. Don't get caught in the Facebook delusion, ladies and gentlemen. Go over to the riponrabbithole.com and sign up for a Backstage Pass and go down the rabbit hole with us where the conversation never ends, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of the conversation never ending, the conversation of science versus scientism is also an ongoing conversation that is raging even to this day. And in here on this show, we pretty much went to war against scientism, and I am proud to say that. I will gladly admit I have taken up the mantle to fight scientism. Since episode 1, we have pointed out different ways that scientism has been wrong time and time again, and I am constantly talking about how much the dogmas of science really annoy me, but we never really have a chance to explain what those dogmas are until tonight. In the first half, we went through the 10 dogmas of science. That's right. In the second half, we're going to actually break down some of these dogmas. Remember earlier in the first half, if you were listening, or you happen to be tuned in the first half, I should say, I mentioned that we would hearken back to the idea of the laws of nature's being fixed. And again, I'm not talking about being constant. I really mean that the laws of nature were actually fixed, ladies and gentlemen. To explain further, here is our return speaker this evening, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake.
I'm going to take first the idea that the laws of nature are fixed. This is a hangover from an older worldview before the 1960s when the Big Bang Theory came in. People thought that the whole universe was eternal, governed by eternal mathematical laws.
And in a universe that was just consistently eternal, the laws would have to be fixed, of course, to be consistent. However, in a universe like ours, it's much, much different.
When the Big Bang came in, then that assumption continued, even though the Big Bang revealed a universe that's radically evolutionary, about 14 billion years old, growing and developing and evolving for 14 billion years, growing and cooling, and more structures and patterns appear within it. But the idea is all the laws of nature were completely fixed at the moment of the Big Bang, like a cosmic Napoleonic code.
Which they absolutely are not a fixed code, but humans in all their arrogance made sure to make them just that. And we'll hear about that here in just a minute.
As my friend Terence McKenna used to say, modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And the one free miracle is the appearance of all the matter and energy in the universe and all the laws that govern it from nothing in a single instant.
And very wise words spoken by Terence McKenna, of course, because as we know, they call us pseudoscientists all the time because we disagree with their pseudoscience, right? Give us one miracle and we'll figure out the rest. Give us a freebie, give us a head start, and we'll start guessing from there, is what that really breaks down to.
Well, in an evolutionary universe, why shouldn't the laws themselves evolve?
And if you buy scientism's own words, the Big Bang Theory, and let's be clear here, it's theory taught as fact, the Big Bang Theory, it's in the name, but, scientism is good at teaching theory as fact. That aside, if you buy the idea that the Big Bang actually happened, right? And after that, everything was completely hot and super hot, nothing could really condense or do anything. And then as the universe cools down, things start to condense. Now, we've already seen one evolution in that step right there. The cooling is an evolution. It changes the way matter forms and interacts with each other. The laws evolved from not being able to interact as it cooled down to being able to interact. So we already have seen in scientism's own worldview that the universe is not fixed but ever evolving, which means the laws that govern it would also have to ever evolve. They could not stay fixed.
After all, human laws do, and the idea of laws of nature is based on a metaphor with human laws. It's a very anthropocentric metaphor. Only humans have laws. In fact, only civilized societies have laws. As C.S. Lewis once said, to say that a stone falls to earth because it's obeying a law makes it a man and even a citizen. It's a metaphor that we've got so used to, we forget it's a metaphor. In an evolving universe, I think a much better idea is the idea of habits.
I think habits is a much better description because, yes, we see many, many planets in the universe, but very few of them like Earth. They're habitually the same. They're round. They go around the sun. They're in a system, things like that. But very few of them are like Earth, at least very few that we know of.
I think the habits of nature evolve. The regularities of nature are essentially habitual. This was an idea put forward at the beginning of the 20th century by the American philosopher C.S. Peirce. And it's an idea which various other philosophers have entertained, and it's one which I myself have developed into a scientific hypothesis, the hypothesis of morphic resonance, which is the basis of these evolving habits.
And hopefully pretty soon we'll be able to actually do an episode about morphic resonances and morphic fields. It's actually a really interesting topic that I cannot wait to get into, but it's a little bit down the line on the schedule right now.
But I want to spend a few moments on the constants of nature too, because these are again assumed to be constant. Things like the gravitational constant, the speed of light, are called the fundamental constants. Are they really constant?
Before we get the answer, go ahead and put in the chat room what you think. Put a 1 if you really believe what science and scientism says, that the gravity constant and the speed of light is continuously constant. It's never changing. It always is, was, and will be the same. Or put a 2 in the chat room if you think there might be something fishy going on here. They might not be what they seem to be. And put a 3 in the chat room if you really don't care what the speed of light is, as long as you're able to see where you're going.
Well, when I got interested in this question, I tried to find out. They're given in physics handbooks. Handbooks of physics list the existing fundamental constants, tell you their value. But I wanted to see if they'd changed, so I got the old volumes of physical handbooks. I went to the Patent Office Library here in London, and they're the only place I could find that kept the old volumes. Normally people throw them away when the new values come out. They throw away the old ones. When I did this, I found that the speed of light dropped between 1928 and 1945 by about 20 kilometers per second. It's a huge drop because they're given with errors of only fractions of decimal points of error. And yet, all over the world, it dropped, and they were all getting values very similar to each other with tiny errors.
Now, how interesting. All the scientists were getting kind of the same numbers, but not really. There was a little bit of significant error there, but they were sort of the same, but it was definitely lower. Definitely different than a consistent number, than a constant. Now, what's going on? Why are we told that it's constant if we know these scientists were definitely recording different values for the exact same speed of light? Well, again, us humans decided we could not stand for that. We have to have something be constant.
Then in 1945, it went up, 48, it went up again. And then people started getting very similar values again. I was very intrigued by this, and I couldn't make sense of it. So I went to see the head of metrology at the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington. Metrology is the science in which people measure constants. And I asked him about this. I said, what do you make of this drop in the speed of light between 1928 and 1945? And he said, oh dear, he said, you've uncovered the most embarrassing episode in the history of our science. So I said, well, could the speed of light have actually dropped? And that would have amazing implications if so. He said, no, of course it couldn't have actually dropped. It's a constant.
I love the arrogance of that answer. Well, of course it couldn't have dropped. It's a constant. We said it was the same. We said it's a constant. There's no way it could have changed. But the way that they solved this problem will really make you question science or scientism on every level. Check this out, guys.
So, well then how do you explain the fact everyone was finding it going much slower during that period? Is it because they were fudging their results to get what they thought other people should be getting, and the whole thing was just produced in the minds of physicists? We don't like to use the word fudge. I said, well, what do you prefer? He said, well, we prefer to call it intellectual phase locking.
Oh, of course, intellectual phase locking. Right.
So I said, well, if it was going on then, how can we be so sure it's not going on today? And that the present values are produced by intellectual phase locking.
So how do you think that they were able to actually make sure that that doesn't happen again? How do they make a constant? Well, they fix the problem, right?
And he said, oh, we know that's not the case. I said, how do we know? He said, well, we've solved the problem. And I said, well, how? He said, well, we fixed the speed of light by definition in 1972. So I said, but it might still change. He said, yes, but we'd never know it because we've defined the meter in terms of the speed of light. So the units had changed with it. So he looked very pleased about that. They'd fixed that problem.
Oh, fixed it they did, didn't they? They made sure it would never come into question again, no matter what. So the speed could change, and we'd never know the difference, ladies and gentlemen, because, the laws of nature are fixed. They're fixed by the guys that fix the measurements. They're not constant, they're not correct, but they're fixed. And once again, I would like you to keep in mind, these are the same people that beat us over the head in the paranormal communities with the word pseudoscience and pseudoscientist, and you have no idea what you're talking about, and that doesn't fit our narrative all the time. We are constantly discredited and told it's pseudoscience. Yet this is from the same people that literally fixed the constants of the universe in such a way that they could not be measured any other way. So guess what happens if you make a measurement that doesn't fit? Oh, it's just an anomaly and throw it out. That's right. When in all truth, if you listen to science and scientism, sometimes they'll admit this, different mediums, whether it be gas or plasma or air or water, different mediums we know bend, slow down, or can allow light to speed up in some instances. So how can the speed of light be constant or the same and different materials change the speed of light. You don't get both ways. You can't have it two ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It either is or it isn't, right?
But I said, well, then what about big G, the gravitational constant known in the trade as big G? It's written with a capital G.
And you've heard me discuss before on this show that there is no such thing as a consistent gravitational measurement across all of the Earth. The gravity changes as the landscape changes. Gravity is going to be different at a much higher location, say the top of a mountain at 6,000 feet, than it is going to be at sea level. The further away from the object you are, there's going to be a difference in gravity measurement. And that is definitely not constant either. However, we are talking a small scale, just the Earth compared to the entire universe. So on the galactic scale, the big G, is there something wrong with that measurement also?
Newton's universal gravitational constant. That's varied by more than 1.3% in recent years.
And I would reiterate that this was in 2013 that this talk was given, so over 8 years ago now.
And it seems to vary from place to place and from time to time. And he said, oh, well, those are just errors. And unfortunately, there are quite big errors with big G. So I said, well, what if it's really changing? I mean, perhaps it is really changing. And then I looked at how they do it. What happens is they measure it in different labs. They get different values on different days, and then they average them. And then other labs around the world do the same, and they come out usually with a rather different average. And then the International Committee on Metrology meets every 10 years or so and average the ones from labs around the world to come up with the value of big G.
And yet another, quote, constant of the universe that is actually being manipulated by the ones in charge. And that is so completely sad because it's hard to do real science when the numbers you're using aren't real, which means we'll never get real answers unless we make real-time measurements and include the ideas and understanding that the constants aren't really constant. That breaks the scientific method all to shreds because you're not using real data and information. You are literally using, how did he put it earlier, mentally phase-locked data, and that is not correct data. So how can you have any formulas that come out with a correct answer if the actual numbers aren't constant? That is complete scientism, and that is do as I say, not as I do type of thinking.
But what if G were actually fluctuating? What if it changed? There's already evidence, actually, that it changes throughout the day and throughout the year. What if the Earth, as it moves through the galactic environment, went through patches of dark matter or other environmental factors that could alter it? Maybe they all change together. What if these errors are going up together and down together? For more than 10 years, I've been trying to persuade metrologists to look at the raw data. In fact, I'm now trying to persuade them to put it online on the internet with the dates and the actual measurements and see if they're correlated, to see if they're all up at one time, all down at another. If so, they might be fluctuating together, and that would tell us something very, very interesting. But no one has done this. They haven't done it because G is a constant. There's no point looking for changes. You see, here's a very simple example of where a dogmatic assumption actually inhibits inquiry. I myself think that the constants may vary quite considerably, well, within narrow limits, but they may all be varying. And I think the day will come when scientific journals like Nature have a weekly report on the constants, like stock market reports in newspapers. You know, this week, big G was slightly up, the charge on the electron was down, the speed of light held steady, and so on. That's one area, just one area where I think thinking less dogmatically could open things up.
One of many, many areas of science where dropping the dogmatism and thinking less dogmatically would open up a lot more finds.
One of the biggest areas is the nature of the mind. This is the most unsolved problem, as Graham just said, that science simply can't deal with the fact we're conscious.
And we also spoke about this in the first half, and this is a topic that we're going to try to carry throughout the entire month of January. Since we've been doing themed episodes for the last 3 months, I've been waiting to do this topic till this month. And this month's theme is going to be the mysteries of consciousness, or the hard problem of science.
And it can't deal with the fact that our thoughts don't seem to be inside our brains. Our experiences don't all seem to be inside our brain. Your image of me now doesn't seem to be inside your brain, yet the official view is there's a little Rupert somewhere inside your head, and everything else in this room is inside your head. Your experience is inside your brain.
In other words, the leading idea is that we are literally hallucinating reality. I am not joking. I can barely say that myself with a straight face. But that is the prevailing idea, is that we are literally hallucinating reality.
I'm suggesting actually that vision involves an outward projection of images. What you're seeing is in your mind but not inside your head. Our minds are extended beyond our brains in the simplest act of perception. I think that we project out the images we're seeing, and these images touch what we're looking at.
And I know right now some of you are thinking, this sounds like utter and absolute absurdity, that we reach out into the environment and touch it with our minds or brains, or we literally project into the environment. I know some of you are thinking this is absolutely bonkers. There's no way Jerry has finally fell off his rocker this time. Well, no, because it actually explains something that has happened to every last one of us.
If I look at you from behind, you don't know I'm there. Could I affect you? Could you feel my gaze? There's a great deal of evidence that people can.
Have you ever had that experience? Go ahead and put a 1 in the chat room. If you experienced the feeling of somebody staring at you, you turn around to find that there is somebody staring at you. Go ahead and put a 1 in the chat room if you've experienced that. Put a 2 in the chat room if you've never experienced anything like that at all whatsoever. And go ahead and put a 3 in the chat room if you would like to experience it, but really have gotten confused when I said the word consciousness earlier. And for those listening over on RiponRabbitHole.com's radio player or around the world live on your radio, do be sure, if you'd like to interact with us, to come on over to the YouTube channels, either the Dark Wolf's Den Show or the Ripon Rabbit Hole over here, and we would love to have you live in our audience, in our chat audience over here, to hang out with us as we broadcast each week. And for everybody listening, whether you're on the YouTube or the radio worldwide, I can feel you staring at me right now.
The sense of being stared at is an extremely common experience, and recent experimental research suggests it's real. Animals seem to have it too. I think it probably evolved in the context of predator-prey relationships. Prey animals that could feel the gaze of a predator would survive better than those that couldn't.
So even speaking on evolutionary standards, it would make sense to have that ability.
This would lead to a whole new way of thinking about ecological relationships between predators and prey, also about the extent of our minds. If we look at distant stars, I think our minds reach out in a sense to touch those stars and literally extend out over astronomical distances. They're not just inside our heads. Now, it may seem astonishing that this is a topic of debate in the 21st century. We know so little about our own minds that where our images are is a hot topic of debate within consciousness studies right now.
And a debate that is still raging even today in 2021. Because remember, this once again was recorded in 2013, and the debate has only gotten hotter. Trust me, I've been following this for quite a while, and I cannot wait to present this month's worth of information to you guys, because, I mean, it is a lot.
I don't have time to deal with any more of these dogmas, but every single one of them is questionable. If one questions it, new forms of research, new possibilities open up. And I think as we question these dogmas that have held back science so long, science will undergo a reflowering, a renaissance. I'm a total believer in the importance of science. I've spent my whole life as a research scientist, my whole career. But I think by moving beyond these dogmas, it can be regenerated. Once again, it can become interesting and, I hope, life-affirming. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I do what I do. Like I said in the beginning, in the intro, from day one, I have fought against scientism on this show. I have fought against dogmatism on this show because it is absolutely ruining free thought and science, and I don't like it. And when I get talks like this where I can really explain to you guys my point of view, this is really why I believe in the paranormal. I know there's a lot of paranormal stuff out there. I've seen paranormal stuff. And the dogmas of science, and like in the cryptids episode, like I mentioned earlier, just show that science don't have the answers. Nowhere near all the answers. So just because they call you a pseudoscientist means absolutely nothing. A pseudoscientist means you may be on the right track. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Just because they don't agree with you doesn't mean you're wrong. Just look at Copernicus, look at Einstein, look at all the many scientists through the years that were ridiculed and smeared and told they were heretics at some point, only to find out that they were absolutely right. Ladies and gentlemen, when I say stay awake but dare to dream, it really goes to the heart of this episode. But nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, in the end, when it comes to the debate between science and scientism, between being dogmatic or open-minded, but between being free-thinking or closed off to new ideas, ladies and gentlemen, in the end, it's up to you. It really is. Because in today's world, we hear about trust the science, right? We hear trust the science so much across the news cycles anymore because that's what they want to beat into your head, the science that they're presenting. But remember, the science we were presented with most of our life, the constants of gravity, the constants of light, the constants of the universe, are not really constant. There's no such thing as a constant in the universe. It's merely a fix of science. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that science tells us the truth, that we should trust the science being presented to us, even though we can find science, real science, that disagrees with what is being presented by the talking heads on TV? Do we really think that we can believe them, or do we think we should do our own research and really look into the science that is presented on both sides of the aisle? Maybe that is the real scientific delusion, ladies and gentlemen. In the end, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, this show may be ending, but tomorrow night we will be back, January 7th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with an all-new episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. That's right. We're going to carry on this discussion of the scientific delusion with a talk about consciousness, also known as the hard problem of science, because science is actually stumped when it comes to this, and there's so much about the consciousness that is still a mystery, and a lot of it is considered paranormal. Things that scientism says can't exist, we know can. And we're going to kick off this discussion tomorrow night, and it's going to be the discussion that we carry throughout the entire month of January. So we're going to have themed shows surrounding the idea of consciousness, and I promise you guys do not want to miss a minute of this. If you learned a lot tonight, just wait till tomorrow night, January 7th, 2021, on the Dark Wolf's Den Show, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. That's right. Then on Friday, our buddy AJ, the Ripon Rabbit, will be back on the airwaves with the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. That's right. And you know, these big old wolf ears, we tend to eavesdrop on those rabbits over there. And I happen to know his topics for this week. Check this out, guys. On Friday night, he's going to be talking about fusion futurists. In this day and age, there's a lot of really quick innovations that are happening left and right. And the futurists of today are talking about such amazing dreams of tomorrow that they're almost unbelievable. That's right. You guys are going to have to tune in Friday night to find out what those are. January 8th, 2021. Then on Saturday, January 9th, 2021, AJ will be back with another episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show, and he's going to delve into the mysteries of the subconscious. I find it interesting. We're going to get it rolled up with the consciousness discussion tomorrow night, and then on Saturday he's going to pick up the ball with the subconscious discussion. You guys definitely want to tune in for that. There's so much that you can do when you learn to train your subconscious. Then on Sunday, he's going to really delve into a topic that I get exhilarated by, and that is the Serpent Mound. That's right. You guys I'm sure have heard about the mound builders in Mississippi and the Serpent Mounds and all the different mounds, of course, that are spread across the Ohio Valley. If not, then you are definitely going to enjoy this episode, ladies and gentlemen. That is, again, January 9th, Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows here on Ripon Common Sense Radio start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, and we'd love to see everybody there. Another place that I would love to see everybody is over at the RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right, that is RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right. Over there, you're going to find my favorite hangout, the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. You will need to sign up for a Backstage Pass. That's absolutely free, by the way, and you can join us in the chat room all night long. Another place we would love to see everybody join us is called Down the Rabbit Hole. Check this out, guys. I spoke about this earlier. Are you tired of being censored by Facebook, Twitter, YouTube? All these big tech companies think they've got you where they want you. They think that you're not going to stop using their service, and they think that they can censor what you've got to say or what you're able to see. Well, we got sick of that. We wanted freely expression truth. We want you to be able to post whatever you see and whatever you find, and we aren't going to tear it down or try to bring in our false fact checkers like Facebook. So guys, if you want a social media network like that, we've created it here at the RiponRabbitHole.com, and we would love to see every one of you over there and help us grow this community so we can really continue to share truth about all things that intrigue you, whether it be political, whether it be paranormal, whether it be somewhere in the middle. Heck, we'd like to hear what you had for dinner. Just come on over, hang out with us, and share freely. That's right, that is the RiponRabbitHole.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for our newsletter. It goes out every Wednesday morning, and it'll have all the shows and topics that we're going to be doing for the entire 5-day weekend here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. You do not want to miss this. This is a weekly information treasure, really, and you can send it out to your friends and family and your family's friends and let them all know about the topics we're going to be discussing, because maybe they might have an interest that you weren't aware of. So definitely go on over, sign up for the mailing list. We do not sell your information. We do not send mass emails or multiple emails. We send one a week and one only. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And speaking of one, there's only one of us Dark Wolves, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to get out of here. So on behalf of our amazing mod teams over in the YouTube chats, on behalf of Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, AJ the Ripon Rabbit, and everybody at Ripon Common Sense Radio, we thank you for being here. And remember, until tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, stay awake, but dare to dream. How? Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a